Greetings everybody. Before we start reading today's chapter, I just want to quickly warn you that this chapter contains some level of explicit violence. It's not like it's blood and gore up the walls, but a fair warning for everyone involved. But with that said, let's get to it. Chapter 1, Blood and Tears. Dons swung his axe with all his might, his blow carrying more than enough power to fell all 5 thugs in front of him in one massive sweeping strike. But he had swung too early, only hitting air while the thugs sent him mocking glances. The bandit leader had been right, Dons painfully realized. His skills had gotten terribly rusty from not having trained with his kinsmen for almost 2 years, and his body was far from the physical peak it had been when he was still sustained by the wonderful how, which Tomba had robbed him and his people of. "Once I would have taken all of you on alone," Dons angrily muttered to himself as he took up a more defensive stand, awaiting his opponent's next move. Iko and Lawson stood in the middle of the small triangle that Dons, Brom and Oliver had formed. Brom and Oliver, while outnumbered, held the thugs at bay with their superior training and their round wooden shields. Ikoi sent one of the thugs screaming to the ground as he hurled a bolt of fire at him, engulfing his torso in bright but short-lived flames, which for a moment filled the air with the smell of charred flesh. A smell which, combined with the difficulties Ikoi had with just having purposefully hurt another sentient being, caused the young sorcerer's stomach to turn. Seeing their comrade hurt, 2 thugs, both wielding clubs, leapt at Ikoi before he had time to manifest another spell. Brom just barely managed to block both thugs aiming for Ikoi with his shield. The clubs made a loud bang as they hit the wooden surface, and the force from the 2 simultaneous blows tossed Brom off balance, opening his flank to a knife-wielding thug who quickly exploited the opportunity and thrust his knife at Brom's chest. The knife stopped dead in the air, half an inch from Brom's flesh. The air around the tip of the blade shimmered faintly purple. Both Brom and the thug were taken by surprise, but Brom, being the one to collect his mind the fastest, quickly brought his sword down on the thug's still outstretched arm, cutting his hand clean off. The thug stumbled backwards into his comrade and fell to his knees, screaming in pain. "Was that you, Elf?" Brom quickly asked as he turned to face the 2 club-wielding thugs he had blocked a moment ago. "Yes," Lawson distracted answered. He was preparing another spell. "It will last a few more seconds," he then quickly added. "The gold we'll get from selling these idiots and their belongings will be more than enough to pay for healers for all of you," the gang leader shouted. "Don't worry about getting a little hurt," she added with a sadistic smile. With the woman's proclamation, the thugs became more aggressive and reckless, especially in their assault on Brom and Oliver. As Brom saw that Oliver was about to panic, he swung aggressively at his 2 opponents, forcing them back, buying time enough to slap Oliver over the back of his head. "Pull yourself together, boy," Brom barked at him hard, then continued in a more fatherly voice. "Keep your stance low, shield high, and retaliate quickly. We are not getting killed by these scum." "Yes, sir," Oliver responded, determined, courage returning to his eyes. Lawson, standing more than 2 meters tall, scouted over the heads of his allies and coldly assessed the situation. Currently, there were 9 thugs involved in direct combat, 5 of them with the Yersong and 2 with Brom and Oliver each. 2 thugs had been incapacitated and were no threat. The rest were keeping a little distance, trying to find an opening. "They're not complete idiots," Lawson thought to himself, slightly surprised. "Normally a group of thugs like this would just have piled up on us, which would have made it easy for me and Ikoi to deal with them." Annoyed with his enemy's surprising lack of incompetence, Lawson decided that he would need to be a little more direct in his approach than usual and started chanting the words to a summoning spell. Dons was hard-pressed, keeping all 5 thugs he faced at bay. 4 of them kept dashing in and out of melee, delivering quick strikes while he was swinging at another. Luckily, his armor absorbed most of the hits, but some managed to strike unprotected areas, leaving painful cuts and bruises. The fifth thug, a young teenager, wielded a chain that he, to very little effect, tried using as a whip. Having learned the teenager's attack pattern, Duns suddenly caught the chain in his left hand, and the boy attacked with it. The boy did not perceive the mortal danger he was in, and stubbornly held on to the chain, trying to drag the Yersong to the ground. And with one powerful jerk, Duns tore the teenager forward towards himself. The boy collided with an half-orc who had seen Duns' outstretched arm as an easy target, causing both of them to tumble to the ground. Duns lifted his huge battle axe over his head, both hands on it once again, and brought it down on the two thugs at his feet with a blood-chilling roar, killing both instantly. The horrible sound of bones splintering and flesh being torn filled the air, followed by a loud crack as Duns cleaved both his victims in two and his axe collided with the street below, spraying blood everywhere, causing all the thugs in front of him to take a frightened step back. Quintus had lost track of the kids after the insane bear man had knocked him into a pile of empty boxes inside a narrow alley. When he had finally picked himself up, both the bear and the kids had been gone. Damn bear, Quintus cursed. Why in all of the 8 hells did it have to interfere? I almost had them, and then he comes roaring and yelling like some lunatic, scares them half to death, knocks me over, and ruins my favorite vest. He continued, as he saw the tear his vest had gotten from a pointy piece of wood. Well, at least it's the vest and not me that's torn, he thought to himself, as he started threading further down the alley, continuing in the direction from where he had last heard the bearman's roar. If I was a little brat of a pickpocket and I was being chased by a foaming mad giant bear man who looked like he wanted to eat me for a snack, where would I go? Quintus mumbled as he started picking up speed again. I would probably run into Poor Town. They should be able to lose the bear there. Now that I think about it, why didn't they just shake me off at the beginning? I realized they'd taken my pouch way too late. They could just have split up, turned out any street, and jumped into an alley each, and I would have had no chance of finding them whatsoever. Quintus' run suddenly came to a halt as he realized what was going on, and the thought sent a chill down his spine. They did not shake me because they didn't want to. They wanted me to follow them, or she wanted me to follow them. Seems like Katerina is up to her old tricks once more, Quintus mumbled, the words leaving a bitter taste in his mouth, as he realized how lucky he had been to be knocked into those grids. She would have skinned me alive if she caught me, especially after what happened last time, he thought, the memory bringing a sad smile to his lips. Well, the bear might be an ass, but he doesn't deserve to fall into Katerina's hands, he sighed, as he understood what those words meant. I have to go and try and save him. Katerina being as she is kind of my fault after all. Quintus damned his mother for having raised him with a good conscience. He had no problem stealing from people who had more than enough already, but letting an innocent fall into the claws of Katerina, he would never be able to face himself or his mother's grave if he walked out on this one. Quintus started running again, quickly picking up speed as he pushed himself to sprint even faster. He knew where Katerina would be, he only hoped it was not too late. Back in their abandoned street, Ecoy, Duns and Laustian, together with Brom and Oliver, were hard-pressed, keeping their ground against Katerina and her thugs. Duns' brutal execution of 2 of their comrades had shocked the thugs for a moment, but the shock was quickly replaced by a rage as they had renewed their assault with increased ferocity. Laustian had finished his summoning and shouted the final command word. A large dog, with a slightly otherworldly glow, materialized right behind one of the thugs that were bringing down blow after blow on Oliver, who could barely manage to hang on as he was already suffering multiple cuts and a nasty bruise after a chain had hit his right arm, giving him difficulties handling his sword probably. The dog attacked the thug, sinking its teeth into his flesh and pulling him off balance. As the thug pummeled to the ground, crying out in pain and surprise as the dog's teeth tore his flesh, 2 of the thugs who had previously kept their distance, jumped to his aid, exactly as Lawson had hoped. With their attention solely focused on the dog and their comrade in need, the tall elf stretched out both his hands towards the unaware thugs and quickly spoke an incantation. An explosion of painfully sharp colors, some not even of this world, shot forth from Lawson's hands and caught both thugs completely off guard. They were knocked backwards by the sheer intensity of the colors, and one immediately dropped unconscious, while the other rolled around on the ground, temporarily blinded, as his eyes slowly recovered. The otherworldly dog dissolved into a silvery mist as the thug it had pinned finally managed to hit it with his knife. Lawson did not worry. The dog itself was unharmed. It was only its material form in this world that had been temporarily destroyed. Somewhat content with the result, Lawson took a moment to catch his breath as he looked around assessing the situation. It did not look good. Even though they had taken out 6 thugs, more had emerged from the houses and the remaining 12 continued their assault, rallied on by their leader. And to make matters worse, he could feel his body aching all over. He had been forced to conjure multiple magical barriers to help the 2 guards survive, and together with the combo he had just pulled off, he was pushing his body to the limit of how much magic it could channel in one day. I only have enough strength to forge 1 more spell, maybe 2, Lawson thought nervously, as he felt fear slowly creeping into his mind. And Ikoi doesn't look like he can keep going for much longer either. Stand still, you Dutchy scum! Ikoi yelled, frustrated, at a thug of elven origin, who, quick as the wind, was dashing back and forth between his comrades, delivering lightning-fast stabs and cuts to Dons and Brom. Ikoi had hurled another orb of fire at him when he appeared last time, but he had dodged it with ease, repaying Ikoi's efforts with a shallow but nevertheless painful stab to his right leg, which made turning very excruciating. Ikoi responded to the stab wound by firing a beam of freezing energy at the elf, who was only grazed as he dodged sideways and ran out of a frustrated and almost panicked Ikoi's field of vision. Ugh! Ikoi exhaled as a thin iron chain suddenly wrapped itself around his throat. While Ikoi had been distracted by the elf, another thug, this time wielding a chain, had snuck close enough to get a clear shot at his neck. Ikoi was violently pulled to the ground. The thugs cheered as they brought down the first of their victims. Brom swung violently at the thugs in front of him, trying to push them back so he could help Ikoi, who laid on the ground beside him, gasping for air as he was being strangled while being pulled towards the wing of thugs. Just as Brom had gotten some distance from his 2 foes and turned towards Ikoi, he saw a flash of grey screen out of his right eye, just barely managing to reach his shield in time. The orc's iron bar struck Brom's shield with such force that he was pushed back into the Yersong and his arm was left numb. Cracks had also appeared on the shield. Why were you hiding, coward? Brom taunted the orc, trying to get his attention before he brought that iron bar down on Oliver. It worked. The orc, who had previously had a smug grin on his face, now looked at Brom, furious. You no call Grog a coward? The orc yelled. I never hide. I waited as nice lady as this, and now I squash you. The orc continued as he charged Brom. While the orc was hammering away at Brom's shield, Don's frustration with his opponents boiled over. Fight with honor, you cowards! He roared, voice full of rage, as the puny tricks in front of him once again wounded him with a cowardly flanking attack. Entering a barbaric rage, Dons pulled back his arm and hurled his giant axe at the woman who had first hurt him, and who was now shouting instructions and emboldening her minions to fight without much regard for their own safety. Katarina was caught completely off guard, her only saving being Dons' poor aim. The axe missed her by half a meter and hammered into the building behind her, tearing halfway through the wooden wall with a thundering bang. While Katarina was still in shock, Dons leapt into battle, bearing claws and fangs as he clashed with the stunned thugs in hand-to giant bear paw combat. He suffered many a wound from knives and clubs, but he was so lost in rage that he ignored all but the worst, and those were repaid manyfold. Don's sudden burst of rage and his engagement in close quarters combat shocked the thug who had a chain around Ikoi's neck, making him lose his pearl for a moment. And a moment was all Ikoi needed. He swallowed a mouthful of air, gripped the chain, and braced himself. Lightning flashed to life around Ikoi's hands, and into the chain, and into the thug, who was instantly electrocuted and fell to the ground in spasms. Ikoi also suffered from the lightning, as he had no control over it once he had sent it into the chain. But, having focused a large sum of his arcane powers around his neck, he managed to deflect most of the lightning. Ikoi sat up, completely drained of both physical and magical energy. My neck is gonna be so sore tomorrow, he thought, lightheaded, as he for a moment tuned out his surroundings. If I live to see tomorrow, he added with a sudden spark of humor. Bang! An ear-splitting sound originated just above Ikoi's head, and he was showered with wooden splinters. Ikoi looked up and saw Brom grunting in pain from what looked like a broken arm. As Ikoi had electrocuted the thug, the orc attacking Brom had expelled an angry snare, taking a step towards Ikoi and swung his iron bar at his head. Brom had rushed to Ikoi's side, blocking the orc's attack with his shield. The shield, however, weakened by many blows, shattered. The leftover force from the blow broke Brom's hand, and when the orc swung at Brom's head, he had no choice but to try and parry with his sword. Brom did not stand a chance against the orc's superior strength. His sword was flung out of his hand, and the iron rod hammered into his head. A loud and disgusting quack filled the air as Brom's skull split. The force from the impact sent the old god flying, and his lifeless body scrambled to the ground as a puppet who had had its strings cut. Brom, no! Oliver cried, eyes in tears, the thugs cheering as they sensed victory draw near. Finally, Katerina shouted. Good job, Grog. Now get the mage. It seems like he's out of juice, so it should be easy. Remember that I want him alive, she quickly added. Ikoi sat paralyzed on the ground, as he stared at Brom's body that lay lifeless less than a meter from him. He heard Oliver's broken voice call out for Brom again and again, as the boy refused to accept that his friend and mentor was dead. And then Ikoi realized something. This is my fault, he thought, as he perceived everything around him as through a fog. He did not even sense the orc gripping him tight by the collar, lifting him off the ground. If I had not been so careless, if I had not lost focus, he would still be alive. Ikoi's thoughts spiraled out of control, unable to process what had just transpired in front of him. I cost an innocent man his life, a good man, a loving man, a man with friends, family, loved ones, and I robbed them of him. Ikoi was suddenly whipped out of his downward spiral of guilt and remorse when the orc landed a powerful punch to his stomach. Ikoi gasped for air and was now face to face with the orc. That was for Jeff, the orc said with a sadistic smile. Next one is Jack, he continued as he pulled back, wetting another punch. When Ikoi saw the orc's face and heard his voice, his head cleared up. It was not my fault, he said out loud, more to himself than anyone else. What? The orc paused, confused, as he was about to punch Ikoi again. What do you say, human? It's not my fault he's dead. It's yours, Ikoi said, this time louder. The orc tossed back his head and laughed. Yeah, me kill him real good. Squashed him like a bug. Ikoi's guilt turned into hate, a burning hate directed at the orc. You killed him. You did it. You. Ikoi screamed, having lost all self-composure. You! With his final outburst, Ikoi's raw emotions created an explosion of pure force, blowing the orc backwards. Ikoi's body was drained of all reserves of arcane power, but the roaring tempest of emotions that filled him up allowed him to tap deep into his birth-given sorcerer's powers. Hate coursed through Ikoi's body, devouring his fat and muscle tissue, turning it into raw arcane energy. His eyes crackled with power. You murdered him! Ikoi screamed as he threw the first bolt of war arcane energy at the orc, who was struck directly in the chest, the sound of breaking bones filling the air. You murdered a good man! The second bolt hit the orc, this time on the right leg, shattering his kneecap with such force that the splinters penetrated the flesh. The orc dropped to the ground, screaming in unfathomable pain. You! Third bolt. Disgusting! Fourth bolt. Ikoi's bones were now clearly visible through his skin. Peace! Fifth bolt. Off! Sixth bolt. Filth! Ikoi screamed, blood flying from his throat. But before he could throw the seventh bolt, someone gripped his waist arm from behind. Enough! You're going to die if you continue, Roshan bellowed sternly, sounding far less composed than he had been until now. Ikoi's emotions calmed, and his vision became clear once again. The orc lay before him, dead and broken, looking like he had fallen from a tall tower. Ikoi collapsed in Lawson's arms, and as he looked down upon himself, he was shocked. His body looked like that of a mummy, dry and thin, like a long-dead corpse. His ribs frighteningly prominent through his torn robe. You really did a number on him, Lawson said to Ikoi as he put him on the ground between him and Oliver. He was dead after the fourth bolt. The rest was just brutal overkill, he continued with an understanding smile. But I think that can actually be to our advantage, Lawson whispered to Ikoi as he stood up. Listen up, you riffraff, Lawson taunted the frightened fox, who, except for those in combat with Dons, had not moved an inch since the horrifying execution of the orc. What that man just did, he proclaimed and pointed at Ikoi, I can do too if necessary. So, if you value your lives, surrender this instant. Of course, this was a lie. But Lawson knew he had to gamble, and his best chance was to use the horror show Ikoi had just put on to try and scare the fox away. Lawson only had enough power remaining for 1 or 2 spells, and since he was a wizard, not a sorcerer, he could not use his own body for fuel as Ikoi had done. That power was something only a few sorcerers were born with, and no one else. What should we do, miss? One of the thugs yelled, clearly intimidated by the threat of another mage going on a rampage. Katerina was red-hot furious. It had looked like an easy catch with only a few casualties up until a handful of seconds ago. Not that she really cared about her minions, even though they adored her, but that the bear man would suddenly start an all-out brawl, making any kind of tactics worthless, and her key piece would be slaughtered by an amok mage. She had not seen that coming, nor did she have a plan for it. Katerina took a quick look at the scenery around her. The bear man was tossing her thugs around as if they were straws, and even though he bled from innumerable wounds, he refused to go down. The man who had been attacked by the strange dog earlier had just fallen to the young guard's sword, and her remaining minions stood in front of the tall little mage, frozen in fear by his threats. Katerina did not think twice. She abandoned her minions and sprinted past them, out of the street and down the road from where those pests who had ruined everything had come. At the sign of their leader abandoning them to their fate, the remaining thugs, not caught in combat with Dons, surrendered. Too demoralized, they dared not even flee. As the thugs laid down arms and fell to their knees, Oliver turned towards the direction Katerina had fled. But before he could manage to take more than a few steps, he felt Lawson's hand on his shoulder, holding him back. Let me go, he said in a low voice, tears drawing lines on his dust-covered face. I know you want revenge for Brom. Seems like he meant a lot to you, Lawson spoke softly. But we need to deal with the matter of hand. He pointed towards Stons, who was still engaged in combat with a small group of thugs. Brom would not have wanted any more people to die, would he? Lawson continued. How do you know what Brom would have wanted? Oliver bit, grief filling his eyes. I don't, Lawson responded patiently. But you do. Would Brom have wanted you to chase some gang leader, or would he have wanted you to save as many lives as you could? Oliver sighed. He was like a father to me, and my whole body screams for me to drive my blade through her black heart. But that's not what he would have wanted. He wiped away the tears and looked up at Lawson. He would have wanted me to save everyone, even though some of them don't deserve it. Lawson and Oliver turned towards Stons and the thugs. The thugs had not even realized that the fight was over, as they were desperately trying to avoid getting caught by Dons's huge claws, and were now doing very little damage to him, as they operated on pure survival instinct. So how are we gonna solve this mess? Oliver asked. As much as I want to put him in an armbar, I don't think that's gonna be a very effective plan, he half-heartedly joked. I'm gonna try and distract him. Get the thugs to drop their weapons and surrender, and let's hope that puts him out of his frenzy, Lawson replied. And if that doesn't work? Oliver asked, already knowing the answer. Then we take the ones who have already surrendered and run as fast as our legs can carry us, Lawson replied, beginning to sound rather nervous. Quintoris was searching the outskirts of a mostly abandoned part of the city for Katerina, as he heard running footsteps and a familiar female voice loudly swearing away. To the abyss with those sons of trolls and their insane bear! Quintoris heard Katerina yell furiously, too caught up in her own anger to worry about people hearing her. I spent half a year and all my money building that gang, and out of nowhere they just come and wreck my whole business. Did I ever ask to be a slaver? No. But did I have a choice? No. Not after what that half-breed bastard Quintoris did to me. Quintoris jumped into an alley, waiting for Katerina to pass by, and when she did moments later, he jumped out, kicked her leg, tripping her over so she was thrown to the ground. Katerina cried out in pain as her hands, knees and elbows were scraped bloody. You! She screamed at Quintoris in a dangerous, almost insane tone as she stood up, knife now in hand. This is all your fault. If you had not abandoned me, none of this would have happened. She continued, still yelling, while drawing attention from the whole street where people had stopped up to see what was going on. I saved you, Quintoris replied, while slowly moving his hand towards his own dagger. I picked you up from the gutter when you had no one else to help you. I let you stay with me. I gave you food and taught you how to defend yourself, as well as how to make a little money. But when I started to outshine you, you left me, Katerina shouted as she sprung forward with hate in her eyes and thrusted her dagger at Quintoris' throat, a blow he parried with little effort. You didn't outshine me, Quintoris replied in a calm but pained voice, as he continued to parry and dodge Katerina's furious assault. You became too extreme. You stole from everyone, not just the witches I taught you. You stole from people who already had nothing. You started using violence to get what you wanted. You hurt people who had done nothing to wrong you. Quintoris finished his speech with a sharp and precise kick to Katerina's left knee, dislocating it, forcing her to the ground, screaming in pain. You always talked about how you were tired of never having enough money. I just did what I had to do to get you that money, Katerina yelled through tears, her emotions being too much of a mix between hate and compassion to clearly distinguish. I was thrilled that you would do that for me, but not at that cost, Quintoris replied sorrowfully, as he felt a sting of regret. Maybe I should just have let her run, he thought for a second. No, it's my fault that she is where she is now. I got to clean this up, he concluded. Katerina made a desperate strike at Quintoris, who kicked the knife out of her hand. And then, even after I told you to stop your violent ways, you come to me with a plan to lure people into abandoned streets and alleys, to rob them and sell them as slaves. Quintoris spoke with disgust painted on his face. I did it for you, Katerina shouted, and the tears in her eyes were no longer from pain alone. I loved you, she cried, but when you finally slept with me, I woke up and you had disappeared, stealing everything I had. She sobbed, tears streaming down her face. Quintoris felt as if a blade had pierced his stomach. I know you loved me, and I might even have loved you too. He spoke with a voice filled with remorse and guilt. But I could not accept the road you chose, he said, his expression hardening. So I took everything from you in the hope that you would wake up, but you didn't. Quintoris turned his back on Katerina. He could hear the guards approaching. Farewell, Katerina, he said, voice breaking. If you had just listened, none of this would have happened. Don't leave me, Katerina cried as if whipped. Please, they will execute me for what I have done, she begged, now sounding truly desperate. Quintus was making his way towards the alley he had hidden in so that he could disappear before the guards arrived. His heart ached with each and every of Katerina's cries for help, but he kept moving. I still love you, she screamed. I want to be with you. I promise I'll listen this time. Please, please take me with you. Quintus stopped. He could not take it anymore. Damning his soft heart, he turned around and rushed to Katerina. The guards were close now, and Katerina could not walk. Hold on tight. If we're getting away, it's going to be a real close call, he grunted as he picked Katerina up from the ground, holding her in his arms. Thank you so much, she cried as she kissed him, hugging him close. I will never forgive you, Katerina whispered hatefully as she broke the kiss, and her concealed dagger slipped in between Quintus' ribs. Quintus fell to his knees. The world started getting blurry as the crimson flower on his chest grew and grew. The last thing he saw before the world went dark was the guards breaking through the ring of spectators, seizing Katerina, who was laughing maniacally. And then the ground came racing up towards him, and everything turned black. Thank you, have a nice evening, and see you next week.